Cage the Elephant Neon Pill album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Cage the Elephant, alternative rock band out of Kentucky. And they are a band that to me have always been a little all over the place, even though I have enjoyed quite a bit of their music. As a matter of fact, their debut album really caught me off guard. This was, very well into my out of my sort of modern alternative rock phase. But this album, I thought, had a genuine quirkiness to it. There was a lot of very fun sort of clashing of genres on this album, and it sounded like the band just had a lot of charisma to them throughout this thing. But almost immediately after, the air was let out of my balloon when I heard their follow-up, Thank You, Happy Birthday. I thought that this record was not nearly as fun as their debut album, and already the band's style just sounded stale and rehashed, and lyrically this album was an absolute mess. So much so, I was very, very much in the mode of, hey, I liked their debut album, but I'm probably not going to enjoy much from them. But when their Melophobia album came out, I was pleasantly surprised with how very consistent the album was. I thought that overall this was just a very solid modern alternative rock record, no matter how clean it was. But ever since, I've kind of been on a, sort of steady decline with my appreciation of Cage the Elephant's music. Their follow-up, Tell Me I'm Pretty, I thought it was okay. A good bulk of the tracks there were actually pretty decent. My issue was that when this album was bad, it was some of the worst material I'd heard from the band in years. And don't even get me started on Social Cues. I thought that record was just the bottom of the barrel as far as Cage the Elephant's music goes. I really thought it was their worst album. I mean, Black Madonna was great, Broken Boy was great too, but so much of this record is just too sleepy, too dreamy, and most importantly, a little too phoned in. Now, while a little lopsided, the singles leading up to this thing, when good, have been pretty decent, and you know what, I had my reservations going into this thing, but for the most part, I do believe Cage the Elephant are back in my good graces. This album starts off with HiFi, True Light as an intro, and honestly, I think this thing's really solid and ushers in the sound of this album very nicely. I love the bluesy riff and the very dreary performance, and that's nothing new for Cage the Elephant. They've been doing that a lot lately as far as their last few records go. However, I will say this, they sound a whole lot more confident doing it here. It's played with a little bit more grit this time around, a little bit more bite as well, and honestly, that's a sound that I don't mind hearing. It's moody, it's a little angsty, it honestly reminds me of the sort of alternative rock I would have grown up with. Plus, when they're on, this band just has an inescapable charisma and energy to them, and you hear it a lot on this intro. It's really, really solid. Rainbow I like even more. I love the gloomy performances all around, the bluesy instrumental as well as really, really classy. I mean, those guitars, those pianos, they are just very raw sounding. I love just how alive this record sounds. And yes, it is a little polished at the end of the day. I understand if this record's a little too clean for some. I totally get that. But I feel like this is performed really well. Not just that, but Cage the Elephant went on just know how to write really decent quality and very instantaneous alternative rock. Neon Pill, this album's title track, honestly, I've loved the hell out of this thing since it dropped as a single. It's just this great sort of rainy day, very dreary tune. I love the hook. I love the synth work. This hook is just so intoxicating. Something about this track is so inescapable. It's just a really great rock single and a really great tune. Float in the Sky, also really nice. I actually really love the piano riff on this track quite a bit. Now, you can argue that this is probably not the heaviest album in the discography of Cage the Elephant. It's also not as varied as some of their early records like Melophobia, but I will say this thing is really classy. While it doesn't exactly push the genre forward, it reminds me a lot of like what Queens of the Stone Age were doing on the Like Clockwork album, where they incorporated this very dreary modern blues sound. And yeah, it's not as dramatic as that album, but it's certainly in the same vein. Yeah, it's really good. I also really love Metaverse. I mean, personally, I needed a track like this here. I love the post-punk revival style to this track. Sounds very much out of the Strokes catalog. I mean, this is the sort of just straightforward but really infectious, guitar track that I would have really clung to in my teens. And it's just so damn catchy. The boys are having fun as well. Now, a couple of tracks on this album certainly do bring back some bad memories as far as Cage the Elephant's discography goes. Like Out Loud, for example. Gotta be honest with you. Heard this as a single, and I almost head for the hills. This track is just not up to snuff. And listen, this has been a pretty dreary album so far. It's got those rainy day vibes, some psychedelic vibes as well. But this is just so wishy-washy and over-dramatic. It sounds like early 21 Pilots. Yuck. Good time. Initially I thought that it was just a sort of middle-of-the-road alternative rock track. Certainly not bad. But over time, really lessened on me. It just kind of sounds too lazy for me. I actually really do love the weird and gloomy and neo-psych inspired production on this track. It's a vibe for sure. But so much of the rest of this track just seems phoned in, and, with just how solid the rest of the record's been, it's just, it's not up to snuff. And I have a lot of the same feelings on Silent Picture as well. It's really frustrating. Once again, this is in the bluesier vein of this album. I mean, once again, we find the band in this sort of much bluesier vein, and I've enjoyed that so far. However, here they don't sound confident with it, and they just sound like they're really trying way too hard when it's come off so effectively on other tracks here. And because of that, the rest of this performance just kind of, just feels limp. But call me crazy. While not propelling the genre forward, I actually really like a lot of this record. Ball and Chain is the kind of track that I wish we got a little bit more of here. It's a little bit freakier, funkier of a tune, genuinely experimental. It's got an off-kilter groove and one of the freakiest hooks I've heard from the band in some time. It's just weird enough to stick with you as well. Shy Eyes is really great too. I love the sort of off-kilter, almost jazzy percussion that we get on this track. Not only that, but just how tortured this track comes off in general. I mean, this has been a very dreary album, but this is a pretty big leap on this track. This is some pretty tortured stuff. I mean, it comes off almost a little campy at times, but not enough to not be effective. I'm gonna be real, Same from a Distance kind of sounded nightmarish to me. This gave me very big Social Cues vibes, but they do straighten up their act. And it's interesting because this track has a lot of, the elements of a track from Social Cues, but everything about it is turned up to 11. The rainy day vibes, the dramatic vocals, this sort of neo-noir feel in the production, it's a really great tune. And I had my reservations on Over Your Shoulder as a finale, but they've cleaned up their act on that one too. Honestly, the opening guitar line, was not a fan of it. But for a sort of old school big alternative rock track with a big sing-along hook, honestly, it's not that bad. It ends up being really respectful and ends off this album on a very solid note. I mean, I think my thoughts on this album overall is it's pretty darn solid. I mean, for the modern alternative rock, very cleanly produced sounding album, it's honestly not the worst thing going. The very bluesy, very tortured vibes of this album come off really classy, and the band just has this natural charisma and ability to write a really catchy hook. I mean, yeah, it's not exactly propelling the genre any more forward, but honestly, it's performed really well. I'm feeling a decent 7 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.